Welcome to Miskatonic University. Today at Miskatonic, we will be discussing one of the most well-known warlords and rumored vampires in history. The Prince of Darkness, the dreaded Impaler, Count Dracula. In today's video, we will go through a basic timeline of Count Dracula's life, from birth throughout a life of war and conquering until an inevitable death. This is the life and escapades of this dreaded ruler. Born in 1431, Vlad Dracula, more commonly referred to as Vlad III, Prince of the Romanian state of Wallachia. His father was the head of a Christian knighthood known as the Order of the Dragon. This order's main purpose was to protect their land and people from evil, and to push back the Ottoman Turks. As the leader of this order, he gave his family the surname Dracul, meaning dragon. Vlad inherited the name Dracula, or as he wrote it, Draculia, meaning son of the dragon. In modern Romanian, the word Dracul has changed and now translates to devil. There is a good reason for this, as we will see later. Vlad's father was losing power and control due to a rival power that was funded by the Hungarians. This pressure led Vlad's father to cut a deal with the Ottomans. They would protect his place of power, as long as he paid tribute to Sultan Mehmed II. As a measure of goodwill, he was to leave Vlad and his brother Radu as slaves to the Sultan as well. While Vlad and his brother grew up as slaves, they were still taught of the Ottoman culture. Radu found peace and purpose in his new life, even getting the nickname Radu the Handsome, as he was apparently charming to the women. Vlad, on the other hand, fought his captives at every turn. He was disobedient and was frequently punished by beating. Vlad was subjected to all manner of torture and punishment, twisting his mind and perceptions. After years of schooling and indoctrination, Vlad and his brother eventually became free members of the Ottoman culture, though Vlad still harbored a deep hatred for the Ottomans. By this point, Vlad's father had died at the hands of the Hungarians. Vlad became the heir to the throne. The Ottomans helped Vlad gain his father's power, so long as he always answered to the Sultan. This, however, did not last long, as after the Ottomans left, the Hungarians came back. Vlad escaped to Moldova, where he met with his uncle, who was assassinated not long after. Vlad and his cousin fled to Transylvania. There they met a Hungarian warrior named John Hunyadi, who shared Vlad's hatred for the Ottomans. Let's talk about John and his family for a moment. John Hunyadi was the head of a royal family known as the Corvinus clan. John had two legitimate sons, Ladislaus Corvinus and Matthias Corvinus. Vlad and Matthias would become close friends. When he was a child, John lived in a village that was hit with a rare and deadly plague. It killed almost everyone and made sick anyone it did not kill. The only one who seemed to be fine was John, although he was affected. The plague seemed to heal his ailments and gave him extra strength and dexterity. He had come to realize that the plague that killed his village somehow gave him immortality. He searched for answers for his newfound abilities, wanting to understand them better and how they could be passed to others. His search led him to alchemy and the occult. While he was on this quest, he was continuing his campaign against the Turks. As John grew older, he became a wealthy warlord. Ladislaus and Matthias seemed to inherit their father's abilities. There are legends that state John had a third son who was born without these genetic gifts and secretly given away to a peasant family. Legend states that as young men, Ladislaus and Matthias were out on a night ride when a rabid wolf attacked Ladislaus. Matthias noticed his brother was not healing as he usually would. He rushed his brother to a doctor, but Ladislaus had turned ill. He recovered a few nights later, but he was never the same. Many believe Ladislaus Corvinus became a werewolf that night. A separate but similar tale is attributed to Matthias Corvinus as well. It is said that Matthias was an avid mountain climber who enjoyed climbing summits and exploring cave systems. One day, as Matthias was climbing, he found a cave more than halfway up the mountain. No sooner did he enter this cave when an entire swarm of bats flew around him, scratching and biting every exposed part of his body. He too could not heal as he normally would. After 3 days, his men found him in the cave, lying on the floor in a coma-like state. Legend states he sprang up when he sensed their blood flowing in their veins. Matthias is said to be the first human vampire. He drained each of them of their blood before making his way back to his village. As Vlad got closer to John and his sons, he knew the only way to defeat the Ottomans was for him to have the same power as the Corvinus family. It is said Vlad met Matthias in the very same cave Matthias was turned in. Matthias gave a grail filled with his own blood to Vlad to drink. After drinking, Vlad fell to the floor, going through the same pain as Matthias did. After, Vlad had vast power. John took Vlad under his wing and not only taught him how to hone his new abilities, but also showed him the ways of the occult and how he could gain even more power. These new abilities and powers warped the young Vlad's mind even further than that of the torture at the hands of the Ottomans. John saw in Vlad an opportunity. If he helped Vlad regain his rightful rule of Wallachia, he and Vlad would have enough power to push the Ottomans out of their land. Their siege was completely successful, and they destroyed the Ottoman army. Now at just age 16, taking the throne of Wallachia, Vlad began his vicious rule. He first invited all of his enemies and their families to a banquet. As they arrived, Vlad had them impaled on large stakes, while their families were taken into slavery or killed. He enforced strict laws and inflicted cruel punishments for those who disobeyed. It is even said that he would eat their flesh and drink their blood, this being the only way to now sustain himself. There is a legend that states that in his home village, the homeless and beggars were overwhelming. Vlad decided to invite all who lived on the streets to a large feast in a grand hall. Once they were full, he ordered for them to be locked in and to have the building burnt down. A crusade led by the Holy Roman Empire begun, meant to push the Ottomans out of Eastern Europe. John Hunyadi's son, Matthias Corvinus, was a leader of this crusade. Vlad helped Matthias with supplies and troops. During the crusade, a general and close friend to Vlad, Mihaly Salegi, was captured by the Ottomans and put to death by being sawed in half. When Vlad heard that his friend had been killed, he was enraged. The Ottomans once again set their eyes on Wallachia, claiming it never left Ottoman rule. The Sultan sent men to Vlad to collect tribute. Vlad insisted they took their turbans off as a sign of respect to him. They refused to do so Vlad had spikes impaling the turbans to their heads. The Sultan sent more men to take the young men of Wallachia for their army. Vlad had these men rounded up and all put to death by impalement. Vlad sent a message to the Sultan saying he will not pay him. Instead, he will come to the Sultan to negotiate. The Sultan decided to ignore Vlad's message and proceeded to try and take him by force with an ambush. Vlad got wind of this and planned an ambush of his own. Vlad and his army were successful, and the remaining Ottomans that were sent were either impaled or enslaved. From this point, Vlad takes his army of 30,000 men into Ottoman-controlled territories, leaving nothing but death in his wake. Within only 2 weeks, he and his men crossed over 500 miles. This was his letter to the Sultan, describing exactly what he did during those 2 weeks. I have killed peasant men and women, young and old, who live out of Ublitsa and Novoselo, where the Danube flows into the sea, up to Rahova, which is located near Chilie, from the lower Danube to such places as Samovid and Gayan. We killed 23,884 Turks, without counting those whom we burned in homes, or the Turks whose heads were cut by our soldiers. Thus, Your Highness, you must know, I have broken the peace. Vlad had gained a vast reputation to his allies, a Christian ruler hailed by the Pope, and to his enemies, he became known as Vicious Vlad Tepesh, or Vlad the King Impaler. The Sultan now turned his full and undivided attention to taking Vlad out, with an overwhelming number of 150,000 men outnumbering Vlad's army. As Vlad and his men were being pushed back, they used scorched earth methods. Every village they passed through, they would poison wells, kill or let loose livestock, purposely leave the sickly behind to infect others, and sometimes even burn whole villages to the ground. Vlad did this to ensure that the Sultan would not be able to use any resources as they followed them. Eventually, the Sultan had pushed Vlad and his men all the way back to the mountains of Wallachia. It seemed that Vlad had been defeated when he did something completely remarkable. Vlad, by himself, infiltrated the Sultan's army, disguised. He was able to gather intel and even surmise where the Sultan's tent was. He went back to his men, and they devised a surprise attack. During the night, Vlad and his men attacked the Ottomans, catching them off guard. This attack was so successful that within an hour, over 15,000 of the Sultan's army were dead. By daybreak, Vlad and his men retreated back into the mountains. The Sultan had almost fled, but his generals convinced him that they would still succeed. He continued into a major village, but found it empty and desolate. The only things remaining were the bodies of over 20,000 Ottomans who had been previously killed and impaled. The Sultan, in complete fear, left Vlad's younger brother Radu, now a high-ranking general in the Ottoman army, in charge of the siege of Wallachia. Radu encircled Vlad's castle. Vlad's wife, who was residing within the castle, thought Vlad had been defeated in battle. She decided she would rather die than be captured by the enemy, so she took her own life by jumping from the castle into the river below. When he found his dead wife, Vlad was devastated, to the point of denouncing God and the Christian faith completely. He devoted his soul to the darkest powers in revenge for his wife's death. This vow he took completely cut him off from divine powers. From this point forward, he is cursed with all the typical vampire weaknesses. Vlad needed more men and resources if he wanted to truly defeat the Ottomans. He got back into contact with his friend Matthias Corvinus, who said he would help. Unbeknownst to Vlad, Matthias would betray him. Upon Vlad's arrival to Corvinus' castle, Matthias had him imprisoned. Vlad would stay there for the next 4 years. It is rumored, however, that Matthias did not betray Vlad at all, but instead continued to teach him and help him contact even darker powers. The evidence for this is in the way Vlad was treated while there. Over these 4 years, Matthias grew to be less harsh to Vlad, as they had previously been friends. Matthias even allowed Vlad to marry his sister, Elisabetta of Chilie. Elisabetta would become Vlad's first vampiric bride. Matthias gave Vlad a house on the countryside, but told him to never return to Wallachia. Vlad completely ignored this command and gathered a small army to take back his rightful throne. Vlad was expecting a large army, but when he arrived at Wallachia, the Ottomans had already fled. He would only be in power for 2 months before the Ottomans returned and overthrew him. As the story goes, the Ottomans had easily defeated Vlad, and they say they even decapitated him, ending the life of the dreaded Vlad Dracula the Impaler. Myths and legends further persist throughout the centuries that this ending to Vlad Dracula's life was mere Ottoman propaganda. Some say after this last defeat by the Ottomans, Dracula went into a self-exile. For more than 100 years he wasted away in his now decrepit castle, feeding on villagers and anyone who would dare come close to the castle. During this time, the Order of the Dragon was resurrected by Valerian the Elder to fulfill its original purpose, to purge the land of its evil. Dracula was now faced with a new threat, one that used the same kind of magic and sorcery that gave him his power. The only difference is, this order used holy magic, while Dracula used demonic forces. At this point, Dracula has no allies left. He broke his trust with the Corvinus family, and everyone else he knew was dead. He was faced with dealing with the order by himself. He used magic to fortify his castle, not allowing anyone to enter. He left his bride there and departed to escape the order. He had fled to different regions while the order pursued him. He quickly learned that he now had many weaknesses, the biggest of which is he cannot rest or regain strength on any soil other than the soil of his homeland. Over the next 2 centuries, Dracula traveled all over the globe, making sure he had his dirt with him. However, he spent most of his time in Italy and Australia. These places are important because these are where he found his second and third vampiric brides, Verona and Alira. After multiple skirmishes between him and the Order, Dracula felt confident that he had ended the Order once and for all. Unbeknownst to him, there were small sects of the Order that still existed in different regions, all too small to do anything. As time passed, Dracula saw how the world was waning more into politics and solving problems through social methods rather than battlefield tactics. He took the opportunity to buy land in Germany. Dracula manipulated an estate broker to send his employee to finalize the paperwork. Dracula hosted the worker whilst feeding on them in the night, but he did not kill them. He finalized the deal and moved dirt from his homeland to the new property. This is a process repeated multiple times by Dracula in order for him to expand where he could roam permanently, whilst feeding himself without leaving bodies everywhere. During the Victorian era, Dracula was continuing this now routine activity when he called for a young property broker named Jonathan Harker. Dracula was planning to buy a property called Carfax Abbey in London. While Harker was at the castle, he left out a picture of his fiancée, Wilhelmina Murray. Dracula saw his first wife who had died in Wilhelmina and wanted her for his own. He trapped Harker within his castle and took a small schooner named the Demeter to reach London. The ship left with a healthy crew and was found several weeks later with no one on board. Dracula being the cause of the crew's demise, of course. Upon arrival, Dracula sought out Wilhelmina and began to woo her. She felt he was familiar, and she even remembered things from their past. It was safe to say Wilhelmina was indeed the reincarnation of Dracula's dead wife. Harker was able to escape the castle and make his way home. When Wilhelmina saw her fiancé, she lit up. She missed him greatly, even with Dracula causing problems. Harker married Wilhelmina, making her his wife to Dracula's dismay. Dracula then bit and turned Wilhelmina's best friend Lucy. Her doctor was a student of a highly esteemed professor named Abraham Van Helsing. Van Helsing just so happened to be a remaining member of the Order of the Dragon, and he was very versed in vampire habit and defense. Van Helsing recruited several men, including Harker, to kill Lucy and destroy Carfax Abbey. While they were busy doing all that, Dracula was able to get close enough to Wilhelmina to bite and turn her, but he was stopped by the men before he could take her. He then left back to his homeland, while beckoning telepathically to Wilhelmina, telling her to join him. She fell into a coma-like state, The men took her to Dracula's castle where they fought and mortally wounded Dracula. Wilhelmina had almost fully turned and was now protecting Dracula from the other men. She took him into the same room he took his first wife after she had died. He looked into Wilhelmina's eyes and told her to finish him as she gave him the peace he lost when she died. Wilhelmina drove a stake through Dracula's heart, ending his undead life and cementing the legend of Count Dracula forever. After 6 centuries, Dracula had died. Although his vampiric legacy that initially started with the Corvinus family continues to this day. There are all manner of vampire that have evolved from this legendary figure, Nosferatu and the Strigoi, just to name a few. In his own lifetime, Vlad had become infamous for his vicious rule and sadistic war tactics. Today, he is remembered as the dark vampiric lord who stalked the innocent aloof enough to wander into the shadows. But even with this brutal history, the villagers who still to this day live just outside his castle remember Vlad Dracula as a hero, a leader who would stop at nothing to ensure his country would not be taken over by foreign adversaries. Whichever viewpoint you choose to take, there is no question. Prince Vladislav Dracula Tepesh was indeed one of the most prolific figures in history.